This week on Cinemaholics, Jake Gyllenhaal reunites with writer-director Dan Gilroy in the all-out bonkers arthouse horror satire, Velvet Buzzsaw.
I completely understand the irony of being critical of this film, kind of feeding into his hand, I'm sure.
Later in the show, we break down the 2019 Sundance Film Festival, teasing some of the most intriguing new films set to release later this year. Yeah, it's okay. But okay in a way that I wanted it to be okay. You know, I was not let down.
Acceptably okay.
Yeah, all that and more is coming up on Cinemaholics. Welcome once again to Cinemaholics. He is a pop culture writer for Cinema Blend, and he also reviews films for The Playlist, Cut Print Film, Hey You Guys, and many more. It is Will Ashen.
Hello.
I had to add in Hey You Guys because, I was listening back to the show and I noticed it felt like there was more on my intro than yours, and that can't be right. It has to be perfectly equal.
Sure.
Yeah.
Perfectly balanced.
Yes, as Thanos would say. And I am the author of the novel Killer Joy, a book about Pixar called The Pixar Theory, and I write about film for Adam Insider, Relevant Magazine, and The Young Folks. I am John Negroni. I guess with mine, it's just tough because I have two books and I have to say them by name, so it just sounds like more, but it's not.
We get it. You wrote books. I didn't write a book. We get it.
You should. I could add to it Will Ashen. He's written in a newspaper, actually. So
I have, yeah. I've written in a newspaper.
Yeah, we should bring it up more often. But anyway, you can find more episodes of Cinemaholics on adamtickets.com. You can write into the show anytime by emailing us, cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. And you can support us directly by becoming one of our monthly patrons to patreon.com/cinemaholics. We love our patrons. On the show today, we are reviewing Velvet Buzzsaw, which just hit limited release and is now available to stream on Netflix. We'll also talk briefly about Confessions of a Killer, the Ted Bundy tapes, and then move on to our Sundance Film Festival 2019 breakdown. I saw 13 films during the festival, and I'm going to share a few highlights and my overall experience this year. I'm going to answer all of Will Ashen's burning questions, which should be a lot of fun. But first up, I'm excited for you, Will, because, this is how I felt when we did the Alex Billington episode last year. It's just like, you got to get all the questions. You have to be the curious one, right?
Yeah. Well, I am curious. I'm very curious about some of these titles.
Good. Well, there's plenty to get through, so we'll try to keep it as brief as possible, but as informative as possible. So, okay, we are going to be putting out a patron poll. We have a few off topics. We need your help in deciding what we should review this weekend. It's between Lego Movie 2, the second part, or Cold Pursuit. And of course, What Men Want is the Dark Horse.
That also comes out.
And The Prodigy. Weekend, right? Yeah, it does. And The Prodigy comes out. But I've already seen Lego Movie 2. Have you seen it yet, Will?
That's okay. Yeah, okay. I saw it yesterday.
Yeah, we could just talk about it right now, but we won't.
We could, yeah.
I do have to apologize. I forgot to say this at the outset, but we are recording this way later than we usually do, a few days late, because I was out of town.
Sorry about that.
I know. We were going to record this while I was going to do it remotely. I had a whole podcast set up, but it was very janky. And it didn't work out because the Wi-Fi didn't work, so that was sad.
Yeah, third time's a charm.
That's right. Yeah, third time because we had to reschedule it twice. Well, I don't know why you put up with me, honestly.
I think it's always fun to talk about the movies with you, Jonathan.
Oh, thank you, Will. I sometimes wish we were a little meaner to each other, like on Siskel and Ebert, but I'll take it, I'll take this camaraderie. Were they? It seemed like they're kind of fun.
They're more, I mean, it's kind of that's a whole other tangent. Yeah, that's a tangent to get into.
Yeah. Anyway, some more off topics. Miss Bala was the other wide release this year. That was the theatrical wide release. I did not catch this one, obviously. Way too busy, but Will, did you or anyone you know see Miss Bala?
Well, I saw Miss Bala in 2011.
Yeah, the original.
The original, yeah, but I haven't seen this one with Jenna Rodriguez, right? That's who's
Gina, yeah.
Sorry, Gina, yeah. And I think it was directed by Catherine Hardwicke, if I'm not mistaken.
It was, yeah. She directed Twilight and whatever else, I forget.
13, which is a good film.
Oh, yeah, I do like that film, yeah. But, Miss Bala, I know Yolanda Machado saw this one. I read her review on The Wrap, and basically just did not like it for a lot of the same reasons. I had a feeling I would dislike it from the trailer, but I don't know. I wasn't really interested in this one, so if any listeners out there are really curious about it, I would go seek that review out. I don't think either of us are going to see it anytime soon. But another movie that you and I have already seen that we'll be talking about closer to when it comes out is Alita Battle Angel. So I just saw this last night. You saw it the other day. We're not going to talk about it in review format, but I will say it looks like they're pretty split on this one. I'm really hoping you and I split on this one, Will Ashen, because I really liked Alita Battle Angel. I get the sense, based on your letterbox, that you were just whatever on it.
I was mixed. I did enjoy it ultimately, But I do think it has severe problems that hinder it that I will discuss with you at a later time.
We'll do that for sure. I really like this film. I can't wait to talk about it. And I'm looking forward to that conversation, especially once more critics see it and there's more of a consensus, I guess, out there. But anyway, moving on, we are doing a new series on Cinemaholics. We're going to announce that now. It's an anniversary series. We haven't come up with like a cool name for it yet, but the basic conception is that we're going to be doing like a once in a while bonus episode. This is kind of a season 3 thing we've decided on. We're going to be talking about films that are reaching like a milestone. So there are some films coming out this year that are, for example, Wizard of Oz is going to be hitting 80 years. So the month that came out, we're going to be talking about that movie. There are a lot of great milestones that we could talk about this year. I think the trouble is going to be narrowing it down. I mean, there's films like Fight Club is hitting its 20 years. Some Like It Hot is reaching like, oh man, I don't even remember how many years that one is.
Easy Rider.
Easy Rider. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Lots of great films that we want to talk about. We're going to try to have on Sam Noland because he's always great to talk to with older films and newer films alike. So keep an eye out for that in your podcast feed. Hopefully we'll be able to do this in February. There's a couple options that we could do. But first, Ashton, we have to come up with a name, and you haven't given me any good suggestions or any suggestions at all.
I didn't realize we needed to come up with a name, but
we always have to have a good name, and it's half the battle.
The Vintage Collection.
I mean, okay, this isn't High Fidelity. We're not John Cusack. Yeah.
Right. I don't know how to brainstorm about it, but I think there's something we can come up with, like, I don't know, something that relates to, like, fine wine, like something that's been, like, sheltered.
Oh, yeah, so the films that have aged well, that have,
right.
Maybe that's kind of a good way to look at it. If you have a suggestion, listeners, please write in cinemahawkspodcast@gmail.com or find us on Twitter, because we want you to do the work for us. We know that you're more creative than us, and it's time that became more obvious than ever.
Right on.
And last off topic before we dive into our main review is just a reminder that our Cinemaholics website is quickly coming. It's under construction. It's almost there, Will Ashton. Just got a few kinks to work out. Still adding on all the archived episodes, but once that is live, it's going to be cinemaholics.net, and we're going to announce that as soon as it is ready to go. That's going to be, as Will said the other week, your one-stop shop for all things Cinemaholics. I'm looking forward to it, Will. I can't wait to see what the listeners put in the forums. That's going to be interesting.
It'll be fun.
Yeah, but more on that when it comes.
I was going to say, it'll be a nice place where I can promote the website without just having to use iTunes, and people that are maybe a couple years older being like, how do you use iTunes? And you're like, well, you got to go, and then you can just go on there, and it's a lot more easy and accessible, and I think that'll be a big help for all of us.
That's right. Yeah, it's going to be very convenient for everyone. But okay, that's it for off topics. Finally got through all the housekeeping. Let's get into our main review this week. It is a new film from Dan Gilroy, who wrote and directed Nightcrawler, a film I really enjoyed from 2014. It's probably in my top 10 of that entire year. I don't know about you.
Yeah, same here. That was definitely in my top 5, I remember.
Yeah. Like in that film, Jake Gyllenhaal and Reen Russo are among our leads, but there's also Zawe Ashton. She was in Nocturnal Animals with Jake Gyllenhaal.
We both have the same last name, I will say.
That's right. Yeah. It was difficult writing my review for Velvet Buzzsaw because every time I brought up Zawe Ashton, I was like, I can't wait to talk about this film with Will.
Okay, sure.
Also, John Malkovich is in this film, Toni Collette, Daveed Diggs, plenty others. Very great cast. In my review for the young folks, I called this an art house horror flick. The basic premise is that Jake Gyllenhaal is a contemporary art critic in Los Angeles. The art community as a whole becomes mesmerized by the discovery of a dead man's never-before-seen body of paintings, which, as we find out, appear to be haunted. To set the scene, we're going to play a clip from the opening scene of Velvet Buzzsaw. In this scene, Gyllenhaal's character Morph, that is spelled with an F, is browsing an art exhibit called Hobo Man, which features a robot homeless man with a mask on. Here is the clip.
Have you ever felt invisible? Once, I built a railroad.
There he is. More.
Howdy.
It's Kenji, as you probably know. It's titled Hobo Man. The response is amazing. Arguably the hit of the show.
Wolf's and female figure 4 years ago.
No, it's new. Vastly different themes.
It's an iteration. No originality. No courage. My opinion.
Well, I absolutely respect the power of your point of view, but this encompasses on a global scale. There's just such a sense of now and in your face, which speaks to pop and cinema and economics. I mean, you can feel the winds of the apocalypse.
I can't save you.
I love that clip. All right, that is from the new film Velvet Buzzsaw. It is a very strange, polarizing movie, but Will Ashton, what did you think of this one? And don't you dare say that critique is so limiting and emotionally draining.
Oh, man, yeah. So, like you were saying earlier, I really, really enjoyed Dan Gilroy's directorial debut, Nightcrawler, and I felt about Roman J. Israel that it fit in that old saying where you have your whole lifetime to make your first movie and 10 seconds to make your second. In that, I felt like he got a lot of clout and recognition for that first film of his, like, oh, great, do you have anything else in the chamber? It's like, well, I have this other idea. And it was probably a little half-baked and not quite there. And ultimately, despite a good performance from Denzel Washington, I just don't think that movie quite works. So I was a little concerned going into this film whether it was going to hew closer to Nightcrawler or Roman J. Israel, but given that Rene Russo and Jake Gyllenhaal were coming back to work on it, I was like, okay, I'm hopeful. The trailer was pretty cool, if a little revealing for my taste. I was like, okay, I'm going to go in. I'm hoping for the best. And ultimately, I will say it's a little better than Roman J. Israel, but I don't think it's by any means nearly as good as Nightcrawler. And I know, based on your review and your feelings about the film coming into this, that you contest that immensely.
I do. Well, I agree with half of what you said. It's probably not nearly as good as Nightcrawler, but that's how good Nightcrawler is, right? I will say it is. I think it's much better than Roman J. Israel. I think that film is a slog. It's so hard to sit through.
If I had to watch one of them again, I'd probably pick Roman J. Israel, even though I do think this is the better of the two.
That is astounding to hear. Yeah, I definitely like this one a lot more. And I'm curious why it didn't work for you as much. And I've done my best to kind of look into more opinions on this and see why I'm an outlier along with a few others. But yeah, to get more specific, this is a film where I've criticized it. I think in my review, it's not a glowing praise, but I really enjoy what this film is doing on a lot of levels. And I think one thing that is not bothering me as much is the horror element. I've seen a lot of people say, or a lot of people give the impression that this is a film that is a better art satire than it is a horror. And if you remove the horror stuff, it would probably be much better than it is. Would you agree with that assessment or something similar to that assessment?
Yeah, because like you said, it's trying to be like three things at once. It's trying to be a horror film, a critique, and a satire. And I would say it's definitely at its weakest as a horror film because it's fairly inconsistent in that regard. And I just don't think it's that creepy, except for like one or two scenes where you could, I think, see the better horror film if they kind of leaned into that more. But I ultimately felt like that, I think you might have said this in your review, it felt kind of tacked on, like they might have were looking for like a genre hook to make it a little more enticing to producers or to Netflix or somebody.
Right.
And so that kind of felt like, okay, we're going to have a little bit of a horror element to make this stand out from other satires of art, culture, and stuff like that. As a critique, I find it kind of elementary, I guess. It doesn't really... I feel like there are so many films of late that have kind of touched similar topics and have done it maybe better. Like The Square comes to mind, Our School Confidential. I mean, there are several more, but I don't want to spend this whole podcast just running down a list of films. But I would say as a satire, I think that's where you can kind of see it working. That clip you showed earlier, I think that's... At the beginning of this, I was kind of digging it. I think I really enjoyed it whenever it was just Jake Gyllenhaal's character. And I feel like his other two films have been very character-focused. And this one, interesting enough, is more of an ensemble, which I would normally... Which other
two films are you referring to? Nightcrawler?
Roman J. Israel and Nightcrawler.
Oh, okay, so Dan Gilroy, not... Okay.
Sorry, yeah, Dan Gilroy's past two films as a director have been a lot more character-focused or singular in its approach.
Whereas this film, Zawe Ashton, is, probably the lead right next to Gyllenhaal. She's a pretty driving force behind the narrative. And then Rene Russo would be about the same, to an extent. It really is those three in the lead.
Yeah. And then sometimes John Malkovich, but then that kind of feels like it's inconsistent. Yeah,
I wouldn't say that he's definitely an important character. I think that he is a very crucial to me liking this film for reasons that we'd have to spoil. but I think that his role is a bit more diminished toward the end of the film for reasons we don't get into. It feels like him and Daveed Diggs and Toni Collette as well, to an extent, they all feel like part of a grander ensemble, and an ensemble that I really love. If I just want to segue right into,
it's a great ensemble. I'm not going to dispute that at all. Yeah,
I guess I just sort of dispute that. This is a film that maybe would have been better off with Gyllenhaal as the sole focus, because
that's what
I
I'm
liked all the
saying,
diving into other realms that this film did personally.
That's basically what I'm saying, because I felt like, none of the performances in here are bad. But
the Billy Magnussen one, I would say, is kind of bad.
But he's so minor in the scheme of things. I think that actor. So Billy Magnussen, he is so good. I feel like he's kind of getting overlooked. Like, he's a chameleon. Like, I was watching The Oath recently, and if you watch that, like Ingrid Goes West, what's it, Game Night. Not only are the characters so different. They're all kind of scuzzy dudes, but the characters themselves are different. But his body mannerisms are different. His physicality approach to each act. I'm sure actors have a lot more richer vocabulary for how they can describe that. But just his character, the way he acts in each film is distinctly different. He really kind of blends into each role. I don't think this is his best work, but I think it's also another good showcase for him.
I like to think of him as the one who's taking Chris Pratt's roles that he's too big for now. And so eventually we're going to reach an equilibrium of Chris Pratt and Billy Magnussen both being too famous for that sort of douchey, late 20s guy.
I guess so. Wasn't he from a musical background?
I don't know for sure, actually.
I felt like he started off on Broadway. I felt like he started off on Broadway before, and then he just kind of worked his way into supporting roles like this. But he's kind of getting a little typecast.
I think it was Ingrid Goes West when he really got on my radar. So at that point,
right, that's how I felt. Yeah. Well, he was announced for the Aladdin movie, and then that's when I first heard about him. And then I saw Ingrid Goes. Anyway, this is a whole other tangent.
We'll get to Billy Magnussen's career later.
Sure, we'll have a retrospective for him in a bit. But anyway, no, I agree with you. I think if Jake Gyllenhaal was a focus, because I felt like whenever he was on the scene, I was actually digging this movie quite a bit. I felt like his character was the most fleshed out, and I think that's the one that Dan Gilroy had the most fun writing. Because his dialogue kind of sparkles in a way that a lot of the other characters, their dialogue doesn't really sparkle. And I just felt like when he made it into an ensemble, that's fine. I think it's good for him to expand himself, but I just don't think he really cares about these characters. He just wants them to be lambs to the slaughter. And I'm not saying because they're unlikable.
To be honest.
But there's a difference between being unlikable characters, which I've seen several films with unlikable characters I like a lot. I feel like, though, if you're going to indulge this movie into nearly 2 hours with characters kind of fleshed out but not really, and kind of saying something but not really, and just eventually kind of delaying the inevitable, which is them all getting killed off essentially. I hope that's not a big spoiler, but I just felt like if you're going to do it just felt like it's in between. If you're going to really have a critique about art culture, you got to go one way. If you're going to make it just a slaughter for everyone who is besmirching art, and they got to get their comeuppance, and you have another approach. This film felt like it was messy in a way that you kind of often criticize a lot of other Netflix movies of being messy, like Mute. And what was that one that you didn't like? I liked Apostle. Those films, I remember you were very critical about how Netflix was probably hindering them because they didn't have enough influence, and you felt like they kind of the filmmakers kind of ran off without enough people saying no or something like that. And that's how I felt about this film, which is why I'm fairly surprised that you are so high on this film.
I just definitely disagree. I think that this film is a complete thought when it comes to how these characters are sort of just super unlikable and what happens to them, all the crazy haunted stuff. I go back and forth. On the one hand, I wonder, maybe it would have been better if it had just been a slick art satire, because I think the energy this film starts with, it really moves, and I was endlessly entertained. I was very tickled by how over the top every character is. I liked the sort of heightened sort of reality that they occupy, because to me, there's no way the actual contemporary art scene in Los Angeles is like this. I'm not an expert or anything, but
no,
you really do get the sense. You get the sense that it's being embellished, but I like that it's being embellished because then you can imply these sort of broad satirical strokes to other forms of art. And I think a lot of people are reading this as a very literal film, and I don't think that's quite the way to look at it, in my opinion, to get the most out of it. Because where the film really works for me, and why I think actually the haunted stuff is a bit important, is because, and even to the fact that the paintings themselves, you get the sense that they're not supposed to be good, because you look at them and you're like, why are people so obsessed with this painting? And you get the sense that it really, Dan Gilroy, and this is my reading of the film, it's not law or anything, but you get the sense that he's trying to say that people get so caught up in sort of a groupthink perspective of something. They're all beholden to the opinion of one person who has all of this power. That's the Jake Gyllenhaal character. And I think that it's exaggerated on purpose so that you can actually take something away from everybody losing their minds, basically, and dying and killing and all of the stuff that happens, as just the expression of Dan Gilroy saying that art is something to be appreciated beyond making money. And I think the message behind this movie isn't just that. If it was, I would say, well, this is just kind of hollow, doesn't really have a point, doesn't really come together. But I think the film does end on a very interesting, unique note, which is the idea of separating the art from the artist. You know, we have right now Bohemian Rhapsody is a film that people are enjoying, but an accused pedophile is, you know, somebody with years and years of sexual misconduct and sexual assault allegations. He's profiting from his art. And this is a movie kind of about that. It's about what to do when you love art that is toxic. And not to spoil anything, but you find out in a very specific way that the art made by this guy, Vetral Dees, is toxic. Like, it's evil. And the film uses horror and haunted stuff and all of that to drive that point home of, like, I get it. It's Dan Gilroy saying to the audience, you want to love things that are problematic, but when you do, bad things happen. And you should just try to be a better person. And I think that it's a very simple lesson. I think I saw somebody liken it to like sort of a Tales from the Crypt episode, which I think is the most fun way to regard this movie. And yeah, I think that's my takeaway, and that's why it resonated with me a bit more amidst all of its misgivings and all of its shortcomings. I think we could probably agree on.
Yeah, no, I do agree. I think that's the intention of the film. I would not dispute that. I just don't think the journey it took to get there was really that worth it, really, ultimately. I think there are good scenes in here. Like, there's scenes that really stand out to me, like the scene where Jake Gyllenhaal is in the sound booth. And like he's kind of hearing his like own critiques kind of echo back over and over and over again. Like that scene works a lot. I think the like with the painting kind of seeping into the one character, I won't give away who, but like stuff like that's kind of cool. Like there's stuff in here I think that would work better in a better film, but it's just so like tonally inconsistent, and like I don't think the pacing of this film is very good at all past like the 20-minute mark. Like it just feels like he didn't really have enough focus on each character, so it kind of lumbers along. Like, it doesn't really have a straight arrow in its approach. And I can respect what he's trying to do as far as your latter point, but I just don't think he ultimately sticks the landing in a way that entertained me nor invested me, particularly by the end where I just was done with it. I just wanted it to be over. I wanted these characters to die so I could turn the movie off Netflix and go about my day.
Quite the opposite for me. I was fortunate enough to be very satisfied because I specifically love, you obviously won't say it, but just the last scene when the credits are rolling, I think sums up everything really well. One of my favorite characters sort of gets a moment that I think just rings of like what the film was trying to do. And for me, it stuck the landing in that way. And I get it. Very, very personal takeaway, but I do think some people are going to like this one, but I think it's like a cautious, recommend. I have trouble figuring out why I like this and why other people don't, to be totally honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I think on paper, this is certainly something I like as far as in theory and what it's trying to do. I just think the execution is ultimately lacking for me.
There are two deaths that I thought were lacking, very underwhelming. Won't say who, but yeah, they happen and you're just like, that's it, that kind of thing. But then there are a couple others that I thought were interesting, like I think one of the very last ones, and then they're fine. They're not horror scenes that will unsettle you much, except maybe one of them. And I really like one in particular that kind of ties everything together. That it's just I like the point that he's making with it, and I don't know. I think that this is a smarter film than you might be giving it credit for, just in my opinion. There's something about this film that I guess I just wasn't I wasn't as bored as you were with it, I guess. Like, I really wasn't waiting for it to be over. I was really liking it the whole way through, and I felt like it was kind of a short film.
I never said it was dumb. I mean, I do think he's a smart guy. I just think the film's indecisive.
Okay, just the execution,
Yeah, I just don't think he really narrowed down how he wanted to tell the story. I think he knew what he wanted to say, for sure. And I don't think that message is particularly new, but if you do it in an entertaining way, like the same, like with Nightcrawler, the message of that film is not particularly new. Like, we know the media is skewed and all that stuff, what it's trying to say. But I think the execution of that is so exhilarating and gripping and intense that you are willing to get sucked in and get that message told again. And I just don't think this film, for me at least, was that enjoyable to hear that message be told over again.
Well, I definitely got sucked into Velvet Buzzsaw. I got sucked into its
like that,
haunted painting.
Billy Magdalene. Yeah.
Yeah. Your pronunciation of his last name is fantastic.
How do you pronounce it? I don't know.
Definitely got a very fun Ghostbusters 2 vibe from that painting for sure.
Oh, okay, I can get that.
Yeah, I like movies that tackle these subjects. I like this movie a lot. I'll see a movie like this that is different, it's original. It may not be perfect, and for some people, it just may not be worth checking out at all. But for me, I'm glad it exists. I'm glad it was a film that I could see that kind of surprised me in a few ways, had something to say that was a little bit different. Even though we can definitely agree the execution is nowhere near as exhilarating and thrilling and sort of surprising in the way that Nightcrawler was, I do think this is a decent third film from Gilroy, and I like that he's tackling more uncomfortable subjects that force us to kind of introspect a little bit. I mean, this isn't something that I like to think about, the cross between commerce and art, because it's something that, we all sort of can find some guilt in propagating in a lot of different ways. So for me...
Yeah, and I do... I always say, I completely understand the irony of being critical of this film. I'm kind of feeding into his hand, I'm sure, but I mean, I gotta be true to my feelings.
I'm glad you have been. I'm pretty high up on this one. I give it a B+. Not for every single person out there, but for the people this film works for, it works for really well. So that's where I came away from it. I think it gets that extra plus too, because I just really love the way this whole thing ends. And I loved it. I think that it's just a great time with your old Netflix account. And I'm glad that I was able to see it at Sundance with an actual crowd. And, maybe that helped out a little bit. I mean, the crowd wasn't super responsive to it or anything. Like, I was laughing more than most people, but I don't know, might make for a different experience than seeing it on a TV or an iPad or something like that. But what about you, Washington?
I was between a B- and a C+. I really wasn't that negative on the film. I just kind of wish it came together in a more enjoyable and investing way. But I'm going to lean towards C+, just because my ultimate disappointment with the film, I think, factors into my grade. But I will say there is stuff here I liked. I focus more on my negatives. I will say I think Jake Gyllenhaal is a lot of fun in here. I think he has a scene in particular at a funeral that's probably one of the funniest scenes I've seen so far this year. I think that scene in particular, I was like, okay, like, I wish the movie was like on this level throughout. I guess that's going back to the satire point. Like, I wish if it was like this the whole time, I would be eating it up. But unfortunately, I found it inconsistent. But yeah, there's stuff in here that's good. I can't say I'm even that negative on it, but to me, it was a bit of a mishandled mess, in my opinion.
All right. I also really love that funeral scene. We have a few listener reviews. We asked you all on Twitter to send us your tweet-sized reviews of Velvet Buzzsaw so we can share on the show. First up from Alicia Grausto, friend of the show.
Oh, yeah, this one.
Her review was, she just put a picture of Jake Gyllenhaal sitting down naked with a laptop on his nether regions. And she wants me to describe this very in like explicit detail. Did I do a good enough job, or Will, did I miss anything?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's about as much detail as we should get into.
It's the way that he's leaning back. It's like very provocative.
I will say that Jake Gyllenhaal is more attractive than most critics I've met in my life. Not counting you, of course, John.
Oh, thank you. Of course. That just goes without saying. Yes, he is definitely not your average film critic or art critic, we should say, but that adds to a lot of the film's kind of interesting charm. Elazar had one word for this film. Elazar's review of Velvet Buzzsaw was dull. So, I don't know, do you agree with that, Will? Is dull the right word?
It's in spurts, I'd say.
So, dull in spurts. Got it.
I would say the film I don't think you can sum it down to one word.
Rachel Stott, her tweet size review is, like the eyes on the painting follow you is the oldest horror movie trope in the world, and this is that, but a whole movie of it. And then she quote tweeted this, sent it to us, and it said, I liked it. So I like that description because I did, it is sort of that thing where you see, like, I remember growing up always going to Fazoli's, that Italian fast food restaurant. And there was always a picture of this kid eating those breadsticks and spaghetti, and those eyes followed you everywhere, Roshan. Have you experienced this phenomenon?
Not at that location, but I think in life I have, yes.
Okay, if there's no Pittsburgh Fazoli's that did this to you, that's good to hear.
Yeah, I don't know if I've been to that location, but I have had that experience before for sure.
Email us anytime with your Fazoli stories. I'm just kidding. All right, and then Kal-El No Reed with the voice of Gal Gadot, which I can't do. That's the Twitter username that I just described. Kal-El No Reed with the voice of Gal Gadot. And the second half of this was in Spanish. So anyway,
okay.
The review is, it could have been worse. Second tweet, or better. Yolanda Machado said, and we mentioned Yolanda before, so she sent us this. Yeah. Velvet Buzzsaw is quirky, strange, funny, so very much LA, and 100% can't say that word on the air. There's children listening. There's plot holes and stuff that is just woof. But still enjoyed it, and Jake Gyllenhaal is shirtless a couple times. 2 heart eye emojis. Valentine's Dazed and Confused said, solid thriller, but it could have been a lot more. Several moments left me on the edge of my seat, but much of the dialogue, especially early in the movie, leaves me confused or annoyed. Still had fun, but 6.5 out of 10. I think that's probably, that's like a C+, right, Will Ashton? C+, C?
No, that's a B.
That's a B for you?
B minus.
Isn't it?
No, it's like a B minus.
B minus. Yeah, okay, B minus
yeah.
I can get with you on, because a B would be like 7 out of 10.
Right.
Yeah. All right, JK said a dark and humorous thriller, but still not only on the mystery of the murderous media, but on its own awareness of its paint-dripping pretense as well. Also, Jake Gyllenhaal, Toni Collette, and John Malkovich. Enough said. And related to that, Vic said the only good is Jake Gyllenhaal's body, and Jake Gyllenhaal's outfits.
We focus a lot on his physical appearance in these reviews, I gotta say.
Yeah. I feel bad.
I mean, I can't blame anybody. I mean, like, he is a very attractive individual.
He is, and I think that he's definitely a key point of the movie. We can all agree on that. Jake Gyllenhaal, one of our best actors. I'm glad people are finally catching up on this. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I feel like I've said this so many times on Cinemaholics that Jake Gyllenhaal gets underappreciated despite being in so many great films and having such a great range. It's just ridiculous.
Today, I just remembered today, like before we did this review, that he wasn't nominated for an Oscar for Nightcrawler, and I just got mad again. Like, I was like, how did that happen? Like, he should have been extremely recognized. He should have won the Oscar that year. I forget who was up that year.
I think it was Michael Keaton for Birdman, right?
Okay.
Maybe Ben Affleck for Gone Girl.
He didn't win, but he what's his face? Eddie Redmayne won for Stephen Hawking thing, Theory of Everything. Yeah. So,
not a fan of how all that went down. But anyway, that is Velvet Buzzsaw. Hope you all enjoy the film if you check it out. Hopefully Will Ashton, you're an outlier here because we want everyone to enjoy this film, right?
Sure, yeah.
All right. We do have a quick Netflix release to get to. I thought you were going to check this one, Will. You were going to check this one out. Do you plan on checking out Confessions of a Killer, the Ted Bundy tapes?
Sure, yeah, at some point. I mean, I don't know. Unlike Twitter, I don't know if I'm particularly enthused to revisit the tales of Ted Bundy, but I will have to make a point to check it out for sure. Yeah,
one reason I saw this was because I watched this on Netflix kind of in between screenings. There is a narrative fiction Ted Bundy movie that premiered at Sundance called Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile or something like that.
You got it right.
Did I get that right? All right.
I think so.
It stars Zac Efron and I think Lily Collins. And I don't really want to see it. Like, I just, the idea of a Ted Bundy movie just doesn't strike me right. And especially after watching, like, I already felt kind of weird about it before watching this. It's a 4-part documentary series. And I watched it. And afterward, I was like, I'm good. I don't need any more Ted Bundy. I don't need to watch a movie about this guy's life. with Zac Efron. Like, no, I don't need it. I think that this documentary, if you want to get your Ted Bundy fix for whatever reason, if you're interested in it, you don't know much about this story. This is something I don't think if you know a lot already, you're going to get much out of.
I think to each project's credit, I think if I've heard correctly, this documentary is more focused on like the actual crimes, whereas the biopic that's coming out is more on like the media focus of it, right? Or is a documentary kind of explore both those topics?
It explores both pretty well because, again, it's 4 episodes, and each episode is at least an hour long. I think 2 of them are longer than an hour. And there are 2 episodes just devoted to kind of the media stuff and his trial and what happened to him. But the first 2 episodes focus more on, where he comes from, the crimes themselves. There are a lot of things that I actually didn't realize that he actually broke out of prison twice, which kind of like shocked me. I was like, wait, he was able to break out 2 times? So this documentary series kind of goes into detail with that. There's interviews with the people who were there, and it's pretty comprehensive. It's hard to watch, but it's one of those things where I do think this is going to end up being preferable to the biopic because I just don't like the idea of it. I don't want to experience it myself, and I'm not sure what our listeners would prefer, but I'd say that this documentary is pretty competent. I was a little worried that it would focus too much on the Ted Bundy tapes, which is like the name of it, but it really doesn't. Mm-hmm. Like, they just use the tapes as a sort of backdrop because the tapes themselves aren't very substantive, and they talk about that. Like, the guy who interviewed him talks about how he had to like really ask weird questions to get Ted Bundy to actually talk and not just, be an egomaniac, basically. So it's on Netflix right now. I actually recommend it if you are interested in the topic. If you just don't want to revisit Ted Bundy, I don't think this is like a must watch for sure. So
yeah, it just sounds like it's captivating on, I guess, a renewed interest in the topic.
Capitalizing, you mean?
I guess so, yeah. But I mean, it sounds like a lot of people watched it.
Yeah.
Based on Twitter.
It's a hit, I guess. I don't know what that means.
And they spent like $9 million on the Zac Efron one. So
is that all? That's like less than an episode of The Get Down.
I mean, yeah, like how much does that compare to an episode of Friends that they spent how much millions on?
Really, Friends?
To acquire?
Oh yeah, because that was $100 million for the whole series. Yeah, I thought you meant when they were actually making Friends. Like
no, like they spent like many millions of dollars to acquire Friends again, and I guess compared to that, it's like a tenth of the budget then.
Right.
Of their Friends acquisition. So, how about that?
Keeping them afloat. I don't want to know how much they're paying Netflix is to keep The Office. I'm sure it's insane how much they have to pay for that. But anyway, speaking of too, so while I was doing Sundance, I watched a lot of Marvel films. Weirdly enough, so I saw.
Rewatch, you mean?
So over 5 days, I saw 13 films at Sundance, but here's the thing, Will Ashton. I'm very introverted. I didn't want to go to the parties. I didn't want to hang out with film people. I didn't want none of that stuff. So I literally would watch the movies I was supposed to watch. And then when I wasn't watching movies, I was writing reviews, like in between the movies. And then I would get to my Airbnb. I'd sit down on my bed and I would watch a Marvel movie to relax. Basically.
Unwind.
Right. So I watched Avengers Infinity War, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Black Panther, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and I'm forgetting another one. I think Thor Ragnarok. Duh. So kind of weird, I guess, that's how I sort of broke apart all of these indie movies that I watched, but
yeah,
it definitely helped. I slept like a baby every night, so thank you, Marvel.
That's nice. Yeah.
All right, so Sundance 2019, we are going to talk about some of the films that I saw at the festival. There were a bunch that I didn't get to see that I wish I had. Last Black Man in San Francisco, I heard was fantastic. Hala is supposed to be really good. Those were the 2 that I really wanted to see, but I couldn't make. The Lodge looks like a really promising horror film that I think got acquired by either A24 or Blumhouse or one of them. I was supposed to see a movie called The Hole in the Ground and a movie called Wounds. Now, Wounds is that one with Dakota Johnson and Armie Hammer. And I didn't go to that one. I traded my ticket for it to see Late Night, which we'll talk about. But the reason I traded is because I heard universal just hate for Wounds, that it just was not very good. I heard good things about The Hole in the Ground, but I wasn't able to see that horror film because that was another midnight film, because I underestimated Will Ashton, how difficult it is to get from theater to theater, because the festival is in both Salt Lake City and Park City. And so when I was planning and I was getting the tickets and stuff, I didn't really take into account that like one theater would be in Park City and then one theater would be in Salt Lake, and it'd be like a 40-minute difference to get to one of those places, or even longer depending on traffic.
Yeah, I was going to say, probably everyone's trying to get to those same destinations, right?
That wasn't quite as big of a deal as I thought it would be, because this is the second half of the festival. So a lot of the people who go to the second half are locals. So most of the people that I hung out with at Sundance were, because again, I went alone. So I was covering the festival for the young folks, and I was by myself, like flew there by myself, stayed by myself, went to the movies by myself.
All by myself.
There you go. It was just like that. So I made friends. I just talked to people in line a lot. I talked to people, like I made so many Lyft driver conversations work. So that's just what you have to do, I guess. As an introvert, you have to be social when you can so that you don't get super depressed. But all that said, yeah, I wasn't able to see The Hole in the Ground, but I did manage to catch a couple of last minute films. So Will, you know what I saw. Was there one film you were most curious about that you were like, I really want to know what John thinks of this one?
Well, I saw Velvet Buzzsaw.
That was one of them, yeah.
I know about that. The one I think I'm most interested in is Honey Boy, which I haven't heard is the best. But that's the one I think I'm most curious about, because that's the one Shia LaBeouf wrote and stars in, about his childhood, I believe.
So I submitted my review for that this morning. So it should be live by the time that people are listening to this. But that was one of my favorite reviews to write, actually. So yeah, that's an interesting one. That one's, I think, Stay Gold features Automatic and Delirio Films. I don't think it's been acquired by anyone else. One of the craziest things about the festival was, so Amazon, as usual lately, bought a whole bunch of stuff. I think A24 bought 2 of the films. But, you know, like Fox Searchlight didn't get a lot this year. Sony Pictures Classics, you know, like the indie arms, all the major studios. There weren't a lot of stuff that they got. I think there's one movie on this list that was Bleecker Street. So all that said, Honey Boy is an interesting one because I'm not sure where that's going to go. And that's a film that I think people will probably be very interested in. So like you said, it's Shia LaBeouf, and it's basically autobiographical, except he plays his father. So so this film, it was one of the last films I saw at the festival. It was like the third to last. And the main character is not Shia LaBeouf. So he plays the father of a child actor who's supposed to be Shia LaBeouf growing up. So Shia LaBeouf, of course, in the 90s was a character, you know, Even Stevens, right? He's like in middle school or whatever. And so this movie follows his story. And his dad, who is played by a Shia LaBeouf named James, is like a failed rodeo clown, former felon, and he's chaperoning his son. His son is on this TV show, and he decides just to spend more time with his father, he arranges it so that his dad is looking out for him while he's doing the shoot.
I was going to say, according to Variety, Amazon bought the film for $5 million.
Oh, okay. So I'm not surprised, but I'm glad to hear that it got picked up, because that's definitely one that I think people will probably get a kick out of this, because the movie goes back and forth in time between Shia LaBeouf as a kid, and the actor who plays the young version of him is Noah Jupe, and the older guy is Lucas Hedges. So Lucas Hedges plays Shia LaBeouf, the person, when in like the Transformers era. Right, when he's like an action star, Disturbia, Eagle Eye, like those movies when Shia LaBeouf was
2007.
Like, yeah,
by the time to be alive.
It actually takes place in 2005, which is not when Transformers came out, but it's definitely more attuned.
But
to that.
He's probably filming them, right?
Probably,
like 2005, 2006. So yeah,
good point. And I said in my review that Honey Boy is Shia LaBeouf's most personal performance ever. how could it not be when you're playing your dad and your dad is like
Right.
an abusive, violent person, but who's also charming and affable? It's a very complicated performance. It's his best performance. I really was looking through his filmography, what the TV work that he's done, and this is it. It's LaBeouf's best performance. I mean, it's haunting. It's heartbreaking. It's you can't get your eyes off the screen. I can imagine people not liking this one because of some of the dark places that it goes to, but I couldn't help but really love it. It really did feel a lot like the Florida Project meets mid-90s, not just because Lucas Hedges is in mid-90s, but yeah, just showing like kids unsupervised, kind of like showing you what's going to happen to them because of the terrible things happening in their childhood. That's kind of where this movie really works. Shia LaBeouf wrote the screenplay, but it was directed by Alma Harrell. This is her first narrative film. She's done some documentaries, including one from it was a documentary about the 2016 election. So definitely worth checking out. Will, I really want you to see it because I think like me, you kind of grew up with Shia LaBeouf kind of in entertainment and pop culture, and it has been an interesting journey for all of us.
Yeah. He's about your age, right? Like a couple years older?
Yeah, just a little bit older.
He's about like 31 now, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's had quite a roller coaster of a career. But I always think he's pretty fascinating. There's something about him, like even when he's like kind of seem out and out, like I think he has proven himself to be a pretty intuitive actor in a way that I think some of his contemporaries are not. And I do think I would say for me, of the ones I've seen, his best performance is probably American Honey.
I was going to say that's probably though I haven't seen it still, but I've heard.
Oh, really?
Yes, we've talked about this. But
well, it's 3 hours, so I can kind of like cut you some slack there.
Well, Sasha Lane is in it, so it's definitely one of those films that's on my radar, considering the performances.
So good,
Yeah.
So good. Yeah, definitely check that out.
Yeah, I would agree with you. He's an adaptive actor. He's just able to sort of move with the times. He obviously has a very natural talent, and watching him play his dad is just something that it's a performance to believe for sure. Mm-hmm. But okay, that's Honey Boy. No idea when that's going to be hitting any sort of wide or limited release, but we'll see.
Probably summer, I'd guess.
Yeah, that's usually when the Sundance films kind of roll out.
Late summer, early fall, that'd be my guess. Like September, probably.
Yeah.
So tell me about The Report. I've heard this one's fantastic.
So The Report is my favorite film that I saw from Sundance Film Festival. It's also my favorite film of 2019.
We'll help this one off till the end. Sorry.
No, we can just get the great stuff out of the way. Yeah, The Report is my favorite film of the year so far. It's the only film that I've given an A- so far. Or it's like the highest grade I've given this year.
Oh wow!
It's terrific. Here's how good this movie is, Will Ashton. We talked about Vice a few weeks ago, and I still maintain my opinion on that movie. My opinion on the movie has not changed, but I do feel like I should like it less because of how much better The Report is at capturing the Bush administration and the things that were going on in the 2000s. That's not to say that this is a anti-Bush sort of like self-flatulating kind of thing. It really isn't. But it is an excellent political film. It has entered my family of favorite political dramas with the likes of All the President's Men, Spotlight, and now this film. I think that those are three very iconic journalism films. And this isn't even a journalism film. It's not about journalism. It's about a Senate staffer. But the work that he's doing, it feels like you're watching what a journalist would do. And it does involve sort of that idea of like following the truth wherever it leads and all of that. Adam Driver is in this film. It's about a Senate staffer played by Adam Driver who is tasked with basically compiling a report on the CIA's tactics on torture during the aftermath of 9/11. So this is basically what happened with waterboarding and a lot of that really advanced torture stuff. And how did that happen? Why was it approved? Did it work? Why did it keep going? And then you find out slowly over the course of the film what happened. And it's fascinating when a film can lay all of that out. Annette Bening is in this film. She plays Senator Dianne Feinstein, my senator here in California. She's the one who kind of works with Adam Driver to basically make sure this report sees light of day. And it does feel like this kind of thing where insurmountable odds. You get kind of a House of Cards feel, but where you can take it way more seriously, I guess, right? Because you get a good sense of how government works, what the rules are, but obviously in a way that's actually a bit more authentic, right? The report is great. Adam Driver's performance in this is, I hate to be kind of repetitive, but it's probably my favorite performance that he's done. And I love Adam Driver in so many things. I think to date, probably my favorite film with him was Patterson. That's a film that really tickles me. It just comforts. You know what I mean? It's a very comfort food.
Very versatile actor.
He really is. Kylo Ren is one of my favorite Star Wars characters because of what he's brought to that role. So he's definitely someone who, ever since I remember seeing him for the first time, probably on Girls, that HBO show.
Yeah, I was gonna say he'll always be a little bit of that character to me. I think there's always gonna be a part of me that thinks that. What was this guy's name? Oh man, I'm blanking on it.
Was it not Adam?
Man. Yeah, it was Adam.
I want to say it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like you. You can't kind of get him out of your mind in that way. But this is a pretty long film. But the way that it handles actual events, like recent history, is done with just deftness. And I'm glad I wasn't alone. You know, like right after seeing it, you know, I kind of looked up to see what other people were saying, and a lot of friends of the show who've seen it already, kind of on the same page. I haven't seen a lot of negative reviews, but yeah, I hope we can talk about this in the near future. It's terrific.
Yeah. So 2 questions just before we bounce to the next film. So you probably said already, this is Scott C. Burns, who is a longtime contributor with Steven Soderbergh.
Yeah.
Does his visual style kind of echo his style at all?
It's very Soderbergh. In some spots, Soderbergh did produce the film. Okay. And it's funny because in some ways it felt kind of like its own thing. Like my mind was trying to do that thing where I associate it with other films, but, and this is going to sound weird, but it did sort of ring more of Oliver Stone than Burns.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, but in a way that I think was a little bit better than Stone. Like parts of this film, they directly mention Snowden, right? And then so like you would maybe think, okay, the movie Snowden, which I liked a little bit better than you did.
It was okay.
I think that Snowden was like a good idea of a film that didn't quite work 100%. It was like a C+ kind of film. But this one is remotely similar, I guess. But like there's something about the way that this film edits its very complicated scenes, because it uses the try-fail cycle in a way that keeps you pretty riveted. Like, basically, Adam Driver has a problem to solve. He solves it. Problem solves it. Problem solves it. But it's the try-fail cycle in the sense that, or I guess not try-fail. It's more like yes, but. So like, does this work? Yes, but this new problem forms. Did this work?
Sorry, that's yes and.
No, and yeah, yes and. There you go. So I'm obviously confusing my terms, but. Yeah, I just think that this is a uniquely shot kind of film in that respect. The way that it captures that narrative style, it feels more like a novel structure, which shouldn't work. Like a movie like this should not be structured like a novel because novels are meant to be read. You're supposed to be watching this. But for some reason, there's just something about the pacing and the editing that makes the report just feel like you're sitting through something pretty special. So really worked on me.
That was probably the Soderbergh influence, I'd have to imagine, because he's very much a snappy editor.
He is.
Not to say that I don't think Soderbergh edited this, right? As far as I know, but he probably had some influence if he's a producer. Are we talking about? You didn't see the new Soderbergh movie there, right?
No, I didn't.
High Flying Bird.
Yeah, what was that called again?
High Flying Bird. That's going to come out on Netflix this Friday, so we could put that on the list of review titles if you want.
I don't know anybody who saw it, so I don't have any buzz for it.
A lot of people I know who saw it are really high up on it. They said it was one of the best of the fest.
Oh, wow.
So that's one I'm definitely excited to check out in a couple days. So my last question, though, was I heard they take a pot shot in the report at Zero Dark 30. Is that true?
Oh, and it's glorious. Oh, it's so glorious. One of my favorite parts of the movie. Because it happens. I won't give anything away, but what you have to take away from it is just pure... This is why I watch movies kind of moment. Mm-hmm. Is when...
And I like...
Yeah.
And I like Zero Dark 30, so I'm not like eagerly looking forward to
I don't want to.
it getting a punch down. But I always like when movies kind of attack other movies that way.
I don't want to say it's even an attack. Like maybe a pot shot is. I don't want it to make it sound like it's like an entire scene dedicated to dismantling Zero Dark 30. It's not it at all. It's just something that happens in the movie that makes you fully appreciate what's going on and sort of recontextualize this era in a way that, because I had questions like leading up to that point. I was like, wait a minute, Zero Dark 30, didn't that contradict what I'm watching right now? Boom. Like it's that kind of setup payoff.
Nice.
So yeah, it's pretty rewarding if you've
exciting.
seen that movie.
All right, so trying to think, what's the Jim Gaffigan movie?
There were two of them. One of them was Troop Zero, which I didn't
Ghost one.
see. The Ghost one is Light from Light, which I have a funny story about this one. So Light from Light is kind of like it's a sort of supernatural, moody film. It's from the same producer, James M. Johnson, who did A Ghost Story. And so in the same way that A Ghost Story is more moody and atmospheric than it is actual horror, that's kind of what Light from Light is. It's about ghost hunters who are kind of investigating a sort of like haunting disturbance thing, but it's more about grief and depression and like the typical emotional stuff that horror movies are all about these days. But Jim Gaffigan is in it. He's like the guy who is, he thinks that he's being haunted by his recently deceased wife. The main character is Marin Ireland, who I think the last thing I remember seeing her in was probably Hell or High Water. And she's so wonderful. Her facial expressions in this film, the range that she gives off it's so likable. Like you watch this movie and you start with her and you really follow her along and you just cannot help but love her as a person. Just in the simple, no nonsense kind of ways. She just brings like an immense likability to the performance as somebody who her passion is sort of being half skeptic, half believer in ghosts. You know, her passion was kind of working with those groups to like investigate the paranormal. But when we meet her, she's working at a rent-a-car, right? Like she's a single mom. Okay. You know, she's starting to get the sense that her kid, played by Josh Wiggins, is, you know, he's growing up. He's about to go to college. He's got girl problems. And that leads me to, the girl who plays his sort of like his best friend who like, he doesn't want to date her because he's worried that they're just going to break up. She's played by Athena Frizzell. So while I was writing my review for Light from Light, it was right before I was going to see the report.
Oh, this story.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I was sitting in this bar and Athena Frizzell, who's in Light from Light, while I'm writing her the review, walks in and sits down at the table right across from me. And so I kind of had like a weird moment because I'm like, I had just watched Light from Light. And I was thinking to myself, wait a minute, this movie is about ghosts. It's about...
I was going to say...
Yeah, the spooky.
Do you have a spiritual connection in that moment? Okay.
She seemed like a very nice individual. Great performance. I think she's a newcomer because I wasn't aware with any of her work before this. But I know that Josh Wiggins, who plays her like sort of platonic, maybe not love interest, he's in another new film that's going to be coming out. And I forget what it's called. But we're going to see more of him soon. But yeah, Light from Light, great cinematography. Paul Harrell directed this. I'm not familiar with his other work. It's okay. It's not a film that I think really spoke to me in any profound ways. I like that it sort of moved away from the typical, like, Hereditary is a horror film about dealing with grief and depression. This film was a little bit more of like what that would actually be like, which is it's not thrilling, it's not suspenseful, it's not tense. It's more of like a meditation on mental anxieties and how we can sort of use the paranormal to try to justify that. So it's definitely cerebral. Like, it's a smart movie. It has some interesting things to say, but I think it's going to bore a lot of people who aren't willing to put up with its slow pace. And I did. I put up with it and I had patience with it because I wanted to see what would happen. I think Jim Gaffigan, this is the first role I think I've ever seen him in a film where he's serious. Like, no laughs at all. He's not joking around.
No quips or anything, not even a dry retort.
Nope. But they did play some funny clips of him in the Sundance pre-rolls. So we got that at least. He said some funny things there. But this is just a movie that takes Jim Gaffigan seriously, and that makes it kind of worth, I think, checking out. Again, not the best film I saw at the festival for sure. I gave it a B-. Definitely worth checking out if the trailer interests you, but I don't think it has that same emotional power that a Ghost Story has, a film that I really like.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, it's not bad. I think that it's one that I would probably watch it again for sure, mainly because of Ireland's performance.
I wonder if they filmed this actually pretty close to a fairly traumatic moment in Jim Gaffigan's life. If that helped channel his performance, but I don't know.
I would believe it because it's a very convincing performance for sure.
Yeah. But okay, we can move on down or up. I'm very curious to hear about the Mustang. Because I was going to say, I haven't gotten to read all your reviews yet for Sundance, but I say of the ones I've read of yours, I think this one's my favorite from you so far.
Oh, thanks, man. Well, that's funny because the Mustang, and I should say, I forgot to say what my grade was for Honey Boy. That was a B, a very enthusiastic B. And yeah, B- for Light from Light, A- for The Report. And my favorite film of the fest, like I said, was The Report. It was the only film that I did not write a review for because Katie Stossel actually had it covered. So she wrote the Report review. She saw it right before I did. And so all the films that we're talking about, all my reviews are going to be on theyoungfolks.com. The only one that isn't out yet is Late Night. I've yet to write that one because I'm still recovering, and we'll get to it, I guess. But the Mustang, that was the 5th film that I saw. And that one, I'm glad you brought that up because I have very mixed feelings on it. What have you heard about it so far?
Horse, prison, bald dude, poetic symbolism.
Yeah, that's right.
And the cinematographer of Raw.
Yes, the cinematographer of Raw. I also think the same. The director might have worked on Raw as well. So the director is Laura de Clermont-Tonnerre. She's done a lot of work on television, and I might be confusing the Raw editor with the co-writer Mona Fastvold and Brock Norman Brock, who worked on it along with Clermont-Tonnerre. So if you can't tell, it's kind of like a French film, but it takes place in the U.S. It takes place in Nevada. So in my review of it, it's a very basic setup. The film is about these prisoners in Nevada who they work in this correctional facility, and they're helping to train these wild Mustangs so that they can be broken in and sold to public auction. And these horses are going to be used in the southern border to basically, for border patrol purposes. And the prisoner that we follow along in the movie, his name is Roman Coleman, which I know, they make fun of the name too.
That's a fun name.
Yeah, right. He's played by Mathai Schoenaerts. He was one of the characters in Red Sparrow. I think one of the villains.
Oh, he's been around.
Yeah, he's been in a lot of TV work. He in this movie, in a lot of the roles that I've seen him in, he's pretty quiet, restrained, but he's a brute, big dude. This is a film that uses him, right? He's been in prison for a long time. He has a teenage daughter who's pregnant, and she visits him in prison, and he wants nothing to do with the outside world. He doesn't want to be free. He doesn't want to be integrated back into the general population. He'll do whatever it takes to stay locked up for reasons that are unclear. But as the movie proceeds, he kind of gets roped in, no pun intended, to becoming one of these inmates who helps train these horses. And he starts to build a bond with such a horse. And then, you see where the film is going. It's like the horse just wants to be free, and he learns what freedom means. Two caged animals. It does in some ways feel like a movie that BoJack Horseman is going to make fun of in about 30 minutes. And I don't want to say that as a negative thing because it is touching, and, it's a simple movie for sure. I give it a B-. I think that I'm between a B- and a B, actually. I give it a 7 out of 10. It's definitely good for what it is. A lot of talent going on here. It really is just the script and the message. It wants you to sort of reconsider what rehabilitation means, right? And, how angry people can become better. And it's weird watching this movie when Liam Neeson is talking about how he wanted to go kill somebody. And then, the Virginia governor is all this terrible stuff's coming out about him. And this is a film that kind of dives into the idea of how do we rehabilitate people? How do you forgive people? What does grace mean? And how can we help each other? And I don't think it goes all the way with it. So it just sort of leaves you with a very basic message. So the answer, it has really big questions, not very great answers, but it does have a final shot, I will admit, Will Ashton, that really moved me. So on the whole, I definitely like it. And like you said, cinematography is great. Ruben Impens did it. I know for sure Impens worked on Raw. He did that one, and Beautiful Boy and Dirty God, which I didn't see. But yeah.
Which one?
Dirty God?
I don't think I know that one, but I quite like the look of Raw and Beautiful Boy, so I'm sure this one's going to look gorgeous as well.
Oh, yeah. The film is beautiful. Yeah, it's very impressive. The way that, and this isn't just cinematography, but the way that they capture prison life feels very authentic, like the cramped dirtiness of it, but in a way that doesn't feel over the top. It just sort of feels lived in and normal, like it should be, but also like you don't want to be there, right? Which is the idea. Yeah. And then there's also, I mean, there are some shots in here, like when certain characters are riding horses where you're just like, man, I like this. I like seeing people ride horses, and I like seeing these people ride these horses. So I had that feeling in this movie.
Horses.
Yeah, that's right. So Mustang, yeah, I go back and forth between a B and a B minus. It's kind of like a really low B, maybe. That's where I'll end it on. I definitely one worth checking out if you're interested at all in the trailer.
Yeah, I was looking up what's the actor's name?
Matthias Schoenaerts.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's been in quite a bit. He's in A Bigger Splash, like you said, Red Sparrow.
Yeah.
Far from the Maddening Crowd, The Drop, Bullhead. That's a good movie. Yeah, he's been in some good stuff.
Yeah,
I'm excited to see this one.
I think it's worth checking out for sure.
Cool. I'll put that one on my list. Mike Wallace is here. I know Mike Wallace. I mean, I don't know him personally, but I know of Mike Wallace, and I was kind of surprised to see this title because I didn't expect it, but it sounds like it's a good one. What can you tell me about that one?
It is good. I am just as surprised as you, actually, because I went into this. There are two political documentaries that I saw and one political movie, The Report. The other political documentary I saw was The Brink. And The Brink is good. I'll just quickly, that's the one that's about Steve Bannon. It's, so it's the person who did... she did I Weiwei Never Sorry, the documentary from 2012 about the artist.
Did she do the other one too? There are two of those documentaries, right?
No, she did the first one. The one she didn't do the one that's like, I think I know what you're talking about. It came out after Never Sorry, but Alison Klayman, she followed Steve Bannon around for a year basically, and kind of like found like, she just like documented his life and work, and the documentary kind of covers what Bannon's been doing in like over the last year and a half, roughly. It's interesting. It's not a great documentary for sure, but I kind of dug what it was going for. I think that it's more important than it is like technically appealing, and I like some of the editing choices she did. So I ultimately actually recommended it. I thought it was pretty decent. I'd give The Brink like a B.
And you said, I think in your written review, that it's not really an endorsement of Steve Bannon, right?
Oh, not
it's
even
pretty
close.
Critical.
Yes, yeah.
It's objective. Yeah.
You could definitely get that takeaway. Like it's a movie that obviously you're seeing a lot of Steve Bannon talking in his own terms, but obviously this is edited and filtered through somebody who disagrees with his politics. And you have to take that into account, right? Like you're watching, like he didn't have any creative control over this documentary. So everything you're seeing was chosen to be seen by the filmmaker and the producer, who are very vocal about the fact that they despise Steve Bannon. So it should be mentioned. But To Mike Wallace Is Here, which is a better documentary. It's been a while, Will, since I've seen a documentary that is this. It's been a while. A documentary that is just this different and creative. Like it's a creative documentary. It's a documentary about the life of Mike Wallace. If you're not familiar with who he is, he basically revolutionized TV journalism. He helped started 60 Minutes on CBS News. He was known in his day for he was feared for his interviews. He was tough. He was rigorous. He asked really tough questions during an era when it wasn't a thing where that was common at all.
I mean, I remember hearing a little bit about him in journalism school.
Right. Yeah. I mean, his son, Chris Wallace, is a Fox News. He's like one of the few Fox News guys who's like critical of Trump, basically, with him and like Shepard, whatever his name is, Shep Smith. Anyway, this documentary covers the life of Mike Wallace, how he became famous. And it's really a documentary about the advent of media journalism. And it's about how it's changed and evolved. And the documentary is very interestingly structured because a lot of it is in split screen, where you have Mike Wallace close up and you have his subject close up, but it's split screen. So you see both of them close up at the same time. And it's a different way to watch an interview, which to me was just fascinating. It was endlessly fascinating the way that they did it. There are scenes where they show Mike Wallace sort of interviewing clips of his past. They dive into his demons. They dive into things that are very brave, like some of the battles that he had with depression and suicide. And what I like about this documentary a lot is that it's no nonsense. It's very creative. It just really has a very strong point to make, and it makes it well. It's that simple. It was directed by Avi Belkin, who did Winding, which I haven't seen. And I just think he's a documentary filmmaker to watch. He made a documentary here that I'm just pretty astounded with, how he pulled it off, because like, for one thing, it's all over the place. Like, it's not chronological. Like, there is a chronological through line where you're following Mike Wallace, but it goes back and forth all the time. It's like 1 minute you're with Mike Wallace in his 80s, but then it ties back into an interview from the 50s. But they're all consequential. Like, they're all related. And I'm just fascinated with the editing here. It's a great case study in how to edit a documentary that I think people should probably study. This is a documentary that I think they should show in like schools, right? Like, it's just a great look at a very famous journalist and what it means to be a journalist and how that sort of changed, since Mike Wallace, reached his older age and he passed away like 7 years ago, something like that. So
I think, yeah.
Yeah, Mike Wallace is here. It's great. I gave it a B+.
Cool. Yeah, that one's on my list as well. Let's switch up a little bit. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on Fighting with the Family.
Fighting with My Family.
Sorry. The new Stephen Merchant movie, I believe, right?
Yeah, he directed and wrote it.
Oh, cool. And I think The Rock produced it, and this was like the surprise film on the fest, I believe.
It was the surprise screening. Yeah, so The Rock, he's in the film, too. He has a very limited role, but he's in it. And yeah, he produced it.
It's like it's a cameo, right? That's in the trailer?
Yeah, it's more than a cameo. Yeah, he's in several scenes. Put it that way.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
It's an extended cameo. He plays a part in the film. It's actually, I didn't know this going in, but Fighting with My Family is based on a true story. It's actually based on a documentary that came out about 9 years ago, maybe less than that, about an actual wrestler named Paige who...
Oh, Paige.
Yeah, if you're familiar with
Paige.
the WWE.
Yeah, Surf's Up to Wave Mania star Paige.
Right. So this is actually her story. And you find out, her family is a wrestling family who she was trained by, and she eventually gets her shot to go to the WWE. She gets trained by Vince Vaughn to sort of like deal with being kind of an outsider, right? Her dad is played by Nick Frost. Her mother is played by Lena Headey, and Jack Lowden plays her brother. And it really is a movie about sibling rivalries and what to do when your sibling is more successful than you, or the other way around, what to do when you are successful at something that your sibling is passionate about and you don't both get exactly what you want. It's a film about not just, going for your dream and going for what you want, but figuring out what you want in the first place. And it's just a very easy, crowd-pleasing sports drama. Like, that's the best way to put it. Like, there's nothing to it that's particularly original, but it's just so heartfelt. Like, you watch it and you can't help but find it. Like, the best scenes in this movie are with the family. The family itself, like Nick Frost and Lena Headey together are just, they're comedic gold. And Florence Pugh, who plays Paige in this film.
Wait, what?
What?
Florence Pugh plays Paige.
She does.
What a time to be alive.
Of course, she's been in a wealth of roles lately. I remember we probably first talked about her when she was Lady Macbeth in that movie a few years back. And, again, she just continues to be one of my favorite performers right now. And as Paige, she just makes that character kind of come alive with like just being somebody that you can't help but root for, even though you can tell she's very indecisive. She's not sure what she wants. And then I was really surprised to see how strong Jack Lowden is in this. I wasn't as familiar with him. In fact, I was wondering if he was like related to Simon Pegg, because he kind of looks like he could be his son, but I don't think he is. Regardless, yeah, this is just a film about a very dysfunctional but fun to watch family. Very hilarious. Stephen Merchant has a really good cameo in this. I think this is one of those films that people are going to really love because it's so funny. I hope that it does really well because it is that kind of thing that kind of deserves to be seen. I know MGM put this one out, and I'm not sure how it's going to do, to be honest. I'm not sure if people are going to show up for it. I hope they do, though.
I guess we'll see. We only have a couple weeks to find out. Maybe a week, I guess. You say it comes out on Valentine's Day.
It does.
But my screening is on the 20th, so something's not clicking there.
I don't know what that's about. I've checked a few sources, and I saw, and I should say I did give this one I was a very high B. I think I'm with this one. Maybe B+.
Cool. Wow. Yeah, that's higher than I anticipated.
Same here. I remember seeing the trailers and being like, I don't know. But yeah, it actually is pretty good.
Florence Pugh's page. That's nuts. Did not expect that.
I didn't expect you to handle it so well.
Well, actually, I know more than you would anticipate about wrestling.
I now know that,
or professional wrestling, yeah. Can you guess my favorite wrestler?
John Cena.
No.
I don't know.
Sorry. You have to censor that out. No, not John Cena.
Ice Cold? Or Stone Cold?
No.
What's his name?
I'll give you a hint that he's not an active wrestler right now.
I don't know. I don't know wrestlers.
It's Mankind. I'm not going to let you guess. It's Mankind.
All right. I don't even remember
Hell
who
in the
that
Cell.
is.
Hell in the Cell. That was like 20 years ago now. Here in Pittsburgh that's when he lost his tooth.
I had a feeling this would be Pittsburgh.
Fighting The Undertaker.
All right. What else you got for me?
Tomorrow Man. That's the one with John Lithgow, right?
Yeah, The Tomorrow Man is very pleasant. Yeah, I said in my review, it's not a great film, but John Lithgow and Blythe Danner are an incredible odd couple. Like, they're just irresistible. Like, it's one of the most lovable love stories I've seen in a little bit. So the movie is about, I said in my review, it's about every millennial's father right now. It's a guy played by John Lithgow who spends all day kind of like gobbling up conspiracy theories from the internet and watching cable news. He falls in love with Blythe Danner because he kind of sees like, oh, maybe she's like him, where she sort of sees that the end of the world is coming. And it's like a romantic comedy, but for the older generation. And we've seen movies that have like, dove into that kind of thing before, dived into that thing before, where it's like, oh, they're falling in love like teenagers, but they're old. That's the joke. The way this film does it, though, actually is pretty effective because that's just the power of Lithgow and Danner and the chemistry that they have. This is a very stereotypical Sundance film. This may be my first Sundance, but I know a Sundance film when I see it. And this is that kind of one.
I mean, I think we all kind of do at this point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, most people who follow film you can see a film and you're like, that was probably a Sundance, right? And then you look it up, but yeah.
100% that's The Tomorrow Man. It's very funny. It's charming. It's got a couple of dramatic moments that don't quite work all that well. Those are the big flaws. But yeah, I was between like a B minus. I think I'm a really low B just because there are parts of it that kind of drag where you're like, I'm kind of over this. Let's end it. But I think what bumps it up a bit to a B is the ending is fantastic. That's all I'll say. It's the perfect ending to this movie. And it's probably the best part. Like literally the crowd went wild. So I would definitely check it out. It's a good film, good performances. And it's just great to see chemistry like that between two very celebrated actors coming together. So yeah, Tomorrow Man, worth checking out.
Cool. All right. So we have, I think, 4 films. How much time do we have left to talk?
I think we have enough time to finish this out. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about Cher. Because that's the one A24 acquired, right?
Yes. Cher is a melodrama, and it features one of my favorite debut performances. So this one was directed by Pippa Bianco. She also wrote it. I'm not as familiar with the rest of her work, but it is fitting that A24 acquired this movie Cher because it's sort of like 13, which we talked about earlier, meets 8th Grade. It's like those two movies. 8th Grade from last year and 13, where it's like, it's a movie that's obviously very conscious about social media, how that's shaping our lives, the lives of teenagers, but then also the Me Too movement. So the conversation around sexual assaults and women who go through that, especially in high school, what cyberbullying kind of really is. This is probably one of the best movies I've ever seen about cyberbullying because it's way more realistic with how that stuff actually happens. And it spends way more time on the aftermath, which is really important, I think. So Cher is about a young girl played by Rian Barreto, who she's a young girl of color. She's on the basketball team. She has a lot of like really close friends. And she goes to high school parties where she gets wasted and she smokes and all that stuff. And a video surfaces that while she was blacked out drunk, apparently she might have been sexually assaulted. It's kind of unclear from the video. And she has to decide what to do about it. She's like, how do I prevent this from getting out? And then when certain people find out about it, they're like, you got to do something. You got to do this. And she's like, I don't know if I should. And the movie is sort of about what is the right thing to do? When should a woman come forward with something like this? And I think one of the film's answers to that question is whatever she decides. And it's a film about controlling your narrative and what that can mean. And in that sense, it really works, but it's also so bleak, Will. I mean, watching this movie will just tear you apart. It fits that Charlie Plummer is in this. He's not great in it. I think he was actually pretty miscast. He plays kind of like one of her friends who like has a secret crush on her. And it reminds me a bit of Lean on Pete because Lean on Pete is just so soul crushing, right? Mm-hmm. It's a bit like in that way. That kind of like darkness that you experience. There are other great performances in here, even though I don't think Plummer is the problem. I just don't think it's the right role for him. But Porna Jaganthan and JC and Mackenzie play her parents, and there are definitely high points. They definitely work. But yeah, it's a good film. Ultimately, I gave it a B. I think that it's pretty solid from A24. I don't think it's up to the like kind of like cultural impact that I think some of A24's other films like Eighth Grade would probably reach. And that really is just because as great as the main performance is I just don't think everything else sort of matches and rises to that level. And it is a film that really loses steam eventually. It ends pretty strong. I won't say in a good or a bad way because I'm pretty split on that, but yeah, it's a movie that I have pretty mixed feelings on, but I do want to call out the score. The score is probably my favorite at the festival. It's the kind of score that the way that it juxtaposes with the film itself, it really puts you inside of Mandy's head, the main character. Like you're in like her sort of like raw emotions whenever the score comes on. It's really effective. Like it's a great movie moment when it happens the first time. And then as it continues, you feel like you're really in it. Like you understand what the filmmaker wants you to feel without feeling manipulated. So it definitely works on a lot of levels. Like where it works so well. But where it doesn't work, it really falls short in my opinion. It just gets really melodramatic in some points where I think it needed something different. And I'm not sure what that is. And I think a lot of people are going to watch it and get a lot out of it. So yeah, that's Cher. Pretty solid B.
I guess we'll move on to something that's a little more lighthearted.
Oh, thank goodness.
I was going to say, I think we need an upper after that one. Let's go with Late Night.
Late Nights. That is a funny movie, Will. Very funny.
Okay, cool.
Very funny.
Because I've heard mixed things about this one, so I'm curious to hear this.
Yeah, and I'm still articulating my thoughts on it because honestly, I haven't written my review yet. You know, I'm still kind of, sorting through my feelings because on the one hand, it's really formulaic. I can see why a lot of people are watching this movie and writing it off because there are moments that are just very cheesy and they feel like an early 20-teens kind of studio comedy. That's definitely here. But there's really good writing in it too. And I think that it has a really great story behind it. Mindy Kaling stars and writes in it. And one of the things I really like about it is, so it really follows the story of Emma Thompson's character. So Emma Thompson plays like a late night host, Catherine Newberry. She's been this late night host for years. And she's sort of realizing that her career is kind of winding down. People don't find the show as funny anymore. So she wants to mix things up. She wants to hire somebody new, somebody who can add something different, right? But one of her problems is that she doesn't get along with her coworkers. Some of the writers have never even met her. So Mindy Kaling kind of shows up, no experience. She's sort of derided by her coworkers.
Kind of like what Conan's doing right now, but if he was less personable.
I don't think that's a fair
Because
comparison.
Conan's mixed up his show, right? And he's like a veteran late night talk show. I'm just trying to talk about the now, I guess. So
And yeah, I don't get the same impression. Maybe I'm not watching the same Cohen bits as you, but I think the thing with
it sounds
Emma,
like more like what was that movie that was talking about like the vibe between Jay Leno and David Letterman, the late night that was like on HBO that like talked about after Carson left. It sounds like it's a little bit similar to that.
it's not even really that, because like I think the thing that's really holding Emma Thompson's character back is that she wants it to be smarter, but then she ends up just being condescending. So like she's focusing less on the comedy and just focusing more on trying to be like John Oliver, basically, where her show is more about insightful stuff, but she's not that insightful. And she brings on Mindy Kaling, and just really as a diversity hire, because her politics are that women should be rising in the workplace. But then one of her producers is like, okay, but like you've never hired a woman on your writing staff. And so she doesn't want to be a hypocrite. So that's where Mindy Kaling comes along. She's the only woman who applies, but she has no experience. So she's it's a Devil Wears Prada situation where she has to win over her boss. Yeah, it's that kind of format. And a lot of the humor in here really works. Like it's just very sharp writing, and it's very funny. And it's so funny that I actually overlooked the really predictable plot points. John Lithgow is in this. He plays Emma Thompson's husband. Cool.
Two Lithgows.
Ike Barinholtz is in this. He plays kind of a comedian who might be replacing Emma Thompson in her show, kind of like a Jimmy Fallon sort of situation. And, you know, like the next comedian or whatever.
Yeah.
And, you know, as a show about late night, it's not that insightful. It's not something that's going to change your mind on if you like or love late night. That's just going to stay intact, I guess. It's not a satire. It's not saying anything all that instructive, but it is an interesting film that kind of dabbles in sort of the funny territory of, you know, gender politics in the workplace. And on that level, it's where the best laughs are. And, you know, there are really funny jokes about white privilege. There are good jokes about ageism and things like that. It's just a crowd pleaser. It's just one of those movies you can watch in the theater and just kind of lose yourself and have a good time. I gave it a very solid B, because I think as a film, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. You can't say it's better than that, because there are just moments in here where you're like, yeah, that's pretty obvious. You know, my worry is that if the comedy doesn't work for you, it's going to go way down. Like this is going to be like a C minus. But if the comedy does work for you, you're gonna have a good time. Obviously, that's how it works, right? So, yeah, Late Night. Sure. It's worth checking out. I don't think it's an amazing film. I know some people have been like, it's unbelievable. It's not. It's pretty by the numbers in a lot of ways, but definitely worth checking out.
Oh, you mean like unbelievably good, or like unbelievable as far as like
unbelievably good?
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, I've heard fairly divided things, but it seems like most response have been fairly in line with what you're saying.
Yeah, it's okay. So, but okay in a way that I wanted it to be okay. You know, I was not let
acceptably
down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Enjoyably okay.
I was not let down by Late Night, for sure.
Sure. And the movie I was talking about before was The Late Shift, was the one I was talking about.
I haven't seen that.
But so the other two movies on here, I don't know anything about. So I'll let you pick which one you feel more enthused to talk about.
Right, so the last two are Relive and To the Stars. I'll start with Relive. Relive was my least favorite film of the festival. It was the worst film I saw. It was the only film I saw that I actually would say was bad. Like, it was just straight bad. And it was bad in a sad way, because it was at least trying to do something different. Like, it wasn't bad in a way that it was generic, or it was like, oh, I've seen like 10 movies like this.
Yeah.
It was bad in a way where it was just like, oh, you had such a good concept. What a wasted opportunity. And what a waste of these performances, because David Oyelowo is in this. He stars as a cop he's very close to his niece, played by Storm Reed. She is murdered in mysterious circumstances, and he's going through grief. And then he finds out that he can talk to her via cell phone, but it's a cell phone time machine situation. And so he talks to her, but from a week ago. So before it happens. So the two of them work together to figure out why she dies. It's very complicated. Like, the way I described it in the review is it has Inception level rules without any of the coherence. because certain things happen in this where you're like, wait, why did that happen? Wait, what? No, what? How does it? The rules make no sense. Like
It sounds confusing.
It's so confusing. And I was like, what am I watching here? And when you find out what's going on, like who the bad guys are and what, it's so bad. Like it takes certain things in this movie that it did not set up and it twists them on their head. And it's unpleasantly bad. Like I was very disappointed. It's really a shame because it's a good premise. And it's a Blumhouse production. And, I said in my review, I think that they should try this again. Like they should go with
remake it.
Yeah. Go with the same premise, but maybe not make it like this really serious thriller. I could see this be a really funny comedy where you're talking to somebody in the past.
Like a Happy Death Day.
Yeah. Maybe it was something with a little bit more energy, because so much of this movie, the big problem with it is most of it is David Oyelowo yelling at Storm Reed, over the phone. You don't want that. This isn't Locke. If Tom Hardy was yelling at Storm Reed, I would have hated Locke. But yeah, I just think that this is just unpleasant. Like it's not fun to watch, and it's just something that just really bummed me out. I guess it was directed by Jacob Aaron Estes. He also did that film from 2011, The Details, which. Also, very inventive film. Yeah, different, kind of different. It has a weird, wacky tone.
But I remember the trailer pretty well.
It's not good, but it swings. No. It swings, Will Ashton. But it swings
I've never heard that one before.
Both films swing about 3 minutes before the pitch. That's the problem. So, not to overuse any baseball metaphors in the week of the Super Bowl, but. Regardless, yeah, relive. I do not want to relive the experience of watching it for sure.
Heyo. So, To the Stars. Not the prequel or the sequel to Map to the Stars, the David Cronenberg movie.
It was so hard. Yeah, it was so hard researching this movie too, because it's hard not to find Map to the Stars because Google just thinks that's what you're looking for. Yeah, we don't know a lot about this one. In fact, it hasn't been, to my knowledge, it hasn't been picked up by anyone. The official image that I used for the review, I had to credit Sundance Institute. So I'm glad we're talking about this one last because it was my second favorite of the festival, right next to the report.
Okay, cool.
And in a way where I do think that it's my favorite because it's so specific to my sensibilities. It's not a film that I think is going to change the game. I don't think that it's amazing. I don't think a lot of people that I know are going to watch it and like it as much as I did. I can kind of see that happening. But it is a film that really just got to me, there's something about this film that really worked to my sensibilities, to the way that I like a movie. So To the Stars is in black and white. I spent a lot of my reviews sort of talking about that, like what it means for a film to be in black and white, why that's important.
Like
and
a
what
Nebraska type of thing?
Kind of, yeah. This takes place in 1960s Oklahoma. And so it's kind of like Roma. It's using black and white style to invoke kind of a memory. And
okay, like the Last Picture Show.
Yeah, or like The Artist, or any number of films that sort of use it in a style to sort of really drive home that the world is different now. That kind of thing. But
sure.
When you do the black and white style, you have to do it artistically, because silent films they were the ultimate expression of what you can do with shadow and lighting. So if you are going to dare do visual storytelling with black and white, you better know what you're doing. And for the most part, this film definitely rises to the challenge, especially the opening and closing moments are just beautiful. Like this is a film where like you could freeze it at any moment and just sit with it for a while. Maybe it'll haunt you and try to kill you, because I don't know, I'm making a Velvet Buzzsaw reference. I don't think it's going to actually work.
Okay. Was this digital or shot on film?
I don't know for sure. They didn't mention that in the Q&A. Okay. But the director was Martha Stevens, and I think it was digital. I think it had to be, because they have a color version out there. And if you shot it in black and white...
it is like Nebraska.
Yeah, right. So if you shoot it in black and white, I don't think that you would be able to have both versions without doing a digital remaster, right? So
no, you'd have to have that in digital, I think.
I think so. So
yeah.
The story itself follows a girl named Iris. She's played by Kara Hayward, probably best known for Moonrise Kingdom, the young girl in that. and she's kind of going through school, but all the kids don't like her. They call her Stinky Drawers. She has like a weak bladder, and she becomes really good friends with a new kid from Kansas City, the big city, Maggie, played by Liana Liberato. And they sort of like build this friendship, but then we sort of learn there's a reason that Maggie had to leave the city with her family. Her father is played by Tony Hale, and her mother is played by Malin Ackerman. And they're the biggest flaws here. Tony Hale has never been so weirdly cast because
Oh, I beg to differ. But you tell me more.
He has to be a certain type of father in this movie that just doesn't work. Like, bless his heart. And I'm using that phrase purposefully.
Okay.
He's a great actor. He's so funny. This movie, it's not a comedic performance. And I couldn't do it. Well, I could not take him seriously. But I had to because it was kind of like terrorizing, like what he has to do in this movie. And then Malin Ackerman, I don't know why she's in this. She barely does anything. She's barely in the film. It doesn't feel like a role. Like there's another role in this movie that you would maybe expect her probably to be the main character, but regardless, it's a film with definitely with some schmaltzy writing, with some sort of like YA kind of wish fulfillment stuff going on. But it really worked on me because I think that these characters are so beautiful. Not beautiful like appearance wise, but in what they say, their body language, how they interact with each other, what they go through in this movie. And it's not your typical film, I guess. And even though in some ways it kind of is, like it does sort of do things that you will see coming and be like, oh, it's that kind of movie, I guess. But
okay.
There's such a beautiful world here because it's not just a coming of age story that's stuck in the school. It goes outside of the school. You spend time in this place, Waukita, Oklahoma, Wakita, and you get to know the people who live there. And there's a good sense of world building here. There's a good sense of understanding the time and place. And I don't know, for whatever reason, it's a film that I liked a lot more than I probably should have. And I cannot wait to see it again. Like I genuinely, as soon as I can, I'm going to see this in theaters again or rent it or buy it or whatever, because it's just a film that definitely spoke to me in a way that I wasn't expecting. So I had a very pleasant experience with it. The opening scene, it's just absolutely gorgeous. And it's just, I don't know how they did it. Like, I don't know how they were able to make it come alive in the way that they did. So it's pretty good. 2 the stars. I give it a B+.
Cool. Yeah, I'll put that one on my list. I haven't heard of it, but it sounds pretty enticing.
And I think that's everything, right? We talked about all the films. Or I did.
Yeah, as far as the ones that are on your list, I mean, there are other ones that were at the festival that I guess you didn't see.
Yeah.
Like Big Time Adolescence, wasn't that the Pete Davidson one?
Yeah, I heard good things. Yeah.
One that definitely attracted my attention just based on its title alone was The Death of Dick Long.
I knew it. Yeah, the Swiss Army Man from the Daniels.
Yeah, I was gonna say it definitely gave me some Swiss Army Man vibes, so I was curious about that one, but I'll have to talk to someone else about it.
Yeah.
I don't know what else there was, but I know there was some other stuff out in the Sundance that attracted some attention. High Flying Bird was another one I mentioned that I heard was good.
After the Wedding. There were a bunch of ones that I was hearing good things about, but there's so many that I don't even know where you'd begin. So, but that's Sundance for you.
There are a lot of horror ones, actually, I heard about.
The main ones I heard were The Lodge, Hole in the Ground, and Wounds.
Yeah, well, there was also the it was premiered elsewhere. It premiered elsewhere, but the new I think it's called The Nightingale, the new movie from the director of the Babadook.
Yeah, Katie Stoltzel did a review for that on the Young Folks. Yeah, she gave it a 9 out of 10. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. I heard it was making people leave the theater because it was so unsettling.
Well, yeah, I read a review from earlier, and I can definitely see that.
Yeah,
based on the content, because I heard it gets pretty graphic. Yeah. But
can't wait.
Yeah. Here, I don't know who's picking that one up though. Truth be told,
it feels like a neon film to me, but we'll see.
I guess so. Them That Follow, we mentioned Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile, The Sound of Silence, just some other ones.
Apollo 11.
What's it called? The one with Aquafina. Heard that was really good.
Oh, I forget what that was called too. Yeah. The Farewell.
Farewell? Heard that was fantastic. That got acquired, I believe, by New Line.
I heard The Farewell is supposed to be like the best of the fest. So.
Yeah. So you didn't see that one?
No, I didn't even have the opportunity to see it. Yeah.
Wow. And then there's that marathon one that also Amazon.
Yeah, Brittany runs a marathon. I forget that actress's name. The woman.
Jillian Bell.
Yeah, from Workaholics.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that was pretty good.
22 Jump Street. Yeah, I heard that was. I heard it was all right, but it got acquired for a lot of money for some reason. I guess because it was another one of those I think crowd pleasing type movies that's probably gonna do well. So yeah, that's all I really heard about. I can't think of anything else that was there that I heard about.
Oh, that should cover it for the most part. So okay, that'll do it for this week's episode. Lots to chew on. I'm exhausted, but in a good way.
Yeah.
Next week, again, we're probably going to be talking about either Cold Pursuit or the Lego Movie 2, the second part, maybe both. Let us know if you are a patron of Cinemaholics. Let us know what you would rather see. But also coming out, The Prodigy and What Men Want. So a lot of options coming to the theater your way.
And High Flying Bird.
High Flying Bird on Netflix. Now, I don't think that's going to be our main review, but hopefully we'll find some time to include that if we see it.
I'll definitely see it for sure. But yeah.
But all right, if you love our show and you want Cinemaholics to last forever, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, wherever your podcasts allow you to write reviews. You can hang out with us anytime on our social pages, our Facebook and Twitter, or in the show notes below. And you can always email us, cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. Will Ashton, it's been a pleasure, but I definitely want you to come to Sundance next year. Let's make it happen.
Hopefully. Yeah. I'm definitely always looking for that Sundance experience, but I have to keep pushing it back. But maybe next year is the year that finally happens for me. Who knows?
We'll just say for now, firm commitment that it's going to happen. From the Internet California, I'm John Gilroy.
And for the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Wallace.
See you next time.